Howdy folks, this is Big Sam. You might have seen in the headlines recently this whole thing about the Russian ammo ban. And you might have taken a look around at the prices of Russian ammo, specifically 7.62 by 54 rimmed, which is what the Mosin Nagant uses. And you might have seen that either it's not available or the prices have gone up considerably. So this really begs an interesting question. Despite this Russian ammo ban, should you still buy the Mosin Nagant in 2021? Because one of the things it had going for it was really cheap to shoot. So what I'm going to try to do today is help answer that question. And to do that, I have two rifles that you may or may not be familiar with. Now, to go back to that question though, should you still buy one? The short answer is yes, but the long answer is a little bit more complicated than that, just like history is. So if you bear with me for 1 or 2 minutes here, I'm going to try to explain to you why a Mosin Nagant should still definitely be on your radar despite the price of ammo going up. In order to do that, the first rifle we're taking a look at is this one at the bottom here. This is your standard run-of-the-mill Mosin Nagant 9130 rifle. There's not a whole lot too special about it. They made several million of these. This one is a 1942. You probably have experience with one of these. These are very common rifles here in the US. And not only has the price of ammunition for these rifles gone up recently, but also the price of the rifles in themselves in general have really gone up, okay? So again, it really begs the question, should we even pay attention to this rifle? Absolutely. Now, I'm gonna have to give you a little bit of a history talk, so bear with me, about why this rifle matters. You see, if you want a rifle that, let's say, shoots a half MOA, get another rifle. If you want a rifle that's impeccably machined and just has wonderful quality control, buy another rifle. If you want a rifle that's just extremely well put together, has exceptional fit and finish, buy another rifle. If you want a rifle that has an extremely smooth bolt action, just really butter smooth and a joy to work, and has an exceptional trigger, buy another rifle. Now at this point you might be asking yourself, well, Big Sam, what about the history lesson? You've said a bunch of negative stuff about this. Why should I even pay attention? Well, here's why. This rifle actually helped save the world. Now, how many rifles can you actually say that about? All right. Now, what do I mean by help save the world? Well, you see, here in the West, especially in the United States of America, we don't really talk a lot about the Eastern Front in World War II. It's not taught very well in our school systems, among a lot of other stuff. And there's a lot of common misconceptions about the US's role in defeating the Nazis in World War II. Now, the United States lost about 500,000 men, which is just catastrophic and nothing to sneeze at. And in this video, what I don't want to do is downplay the sacrifices that our veterans made, that some of my family members made in World War II, and so maybe some of your family members as well. That's not what we're trying to do in this video. But what I'm trying to help you understand is the role that this rifle actually played in the war. So let's fast forward, or rewind rather, to the year 1941. In 1941, we haven't even gotten in the war yet, come June 22nd, which is when Operation Barbarossa started. And that's, of course, when the Nazis invaded the Soviet Union. Now, this was a devastating year for really all of Europe. In the second half of 1941, the Russians had millions of casualties. They lost millions of rifles in 6 months. And it's nothing to sneeze at. And we can think a lot about in the West that, oh, well, we really helped win the war. Well, we did, through both our troops, because again, we had 500,000 men lost, but also you got to remember that we had a lot of lend-lease programs going with the Russians. So we gave them food, Spam. The Russian army marched on Spam. We gave them trucks. We gave them all sorts of things, and that really helped them out. But the point I'd like to make here is that while the Americans had like 500,000 casualties, the Soviet Union, including civilians, had, it's estimated, upwards of 28 million casualties. Now, why is that? Well, there's a very good reason. You see, the Soviet Union was responsible for destroying approximately 70% of the Nazi war machine. 70%. It truly is the Russians that won World War II with their blood, and with the blood of 1 million men, millions of men and women, and the lead from millions of Mosin Nagants just like this one. If the Russians were not allies to us in World War II, I don't know what the world would look like today, but it would certainly look a lot different, and I don't think in a good way. And so here in the West, we often look at these and call them garbage rods. And as I mentioned before, this is not going to be the nicest rifle you've ever handled. And while it may be more expensive to buy or to shoot now, what's really important about this rifle is the fact that it played an absolutely crucial role in history that few other rifles can muster. And so when you hold one of these in your hands, you can almost feel the stories that it can tell you about the horrible places that it went. Was this rifle at Stalingrad? Was it at Kursk? Was it at Kharkov? Was it at the Battle of Berlin? It could have been in a number of battles, and here in the West, it's just a battle that we look at and we see a figure, oh, 500,000 men died. But this rifle saw it and it lived it, and maybe its owner or multiple owners didn't live to tell the stories of the horrors of World War II, but this rifle here today can. So if you want an extremely important part of world history, this is a rifle you need. And it's this historical value. It's just one of the things that makes the Mosin Nagant such an amazing and charming rifle. So that's this rifle down here. This is a 9130 rifle. This was the standard infantry rifle that the Russians used in World War I. Millions and millions of these were used. And ultimately, it's rifles like this that helped defeat the Nazi war machine. But what about this rifle up here? Well, we're kind of going to go to the opposite realm of the Mosin Nagant world. This is actually a Finnish M39. Now, this is a really interesting rifle. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at it. We can see here that it was produced by the Sacco factory in 1943. Okay, but that's not really the whole story here. So what exactly is this rifle? Well, to understand that, we have to understand there was this thing called the Winter War, okay? And what happened was, in 1939, the Soviet Union wanted to make Finland again a part of Russian territory. Finland used to be a part of Russia since 1809. However, they declared their independence from Russia in 1918 when the whole Russian Civil War broke out. Well, ever since, Russia was pretty sore about it, and they wanted that territory back. Finland, however, wanted to maintain their independence. So on November 30th of the year 1939, the Soviet Union invaded Finland. And it was a horrible war, especially for the Soviets. They were not very well equipped or prepared for that war. And what ended up happening was they came to a truce. And that truce, Finland maintained their independence, but they lost about 11% of their territory. So we fast forward to the year 1941, which takes us to this rifle, or the war that this rifle would have taken place in, is called the Continuation War, the Finnish Continuation War. The whole goal of this war was to regain the territory Finland gave up in concessions after the Winter War. That's all they wanted. They didn't want to invade the Soviet Union or anything. They wanted their land back. Hundreds of thousands of Finns actually had to leave, and they just burned their houses because they didn't want the Soviets to take them. So that's really how they felt about the Russians. Well, in Finland, they had a much different doctrine. So you see, the Soviet Union's doctrine was like this rifle. We're just going to make millions of them. It's going to be a little crude. Some of them will be nicer than others, but it'll work just fine. And we're going to arm millions of men with this. And we're going to overwhelm our enemies with superior manpower. That was one of their tactics. Well, the Finnish were actually the opposite of that, because they didn't have that many people. What they did have was skill. So Finland had a bunch of Mosin Nagants that they bought kind of during the interwar period between World War I and World War II. And they actually had all these interesting rifles from different countries they bought that were used in World War I. After World War I, there were tons of rifles scattered all around, Mosin Nagants, and Finland would buy all sorts of rifles in all sorts of conditions. A lot of them were junk. The rifles were just shot out and useless. On guns like that, they actually kept the receiver, which is this part, put a new barrel on it. So what's really interesting about these rifles is you can actually have old, ancient, even antique receivers with these beautiful, impeccably made rifles made by Finland. And the other things they did were things like improve the trigger. This rifle has an absolutely fantastic trigger. The bolt is super smooth. It has basically target sights here, right there. I mean, it's just an absolutely wonderful rifle. These are so wonderful. They are extremely accurate. Now, one thing about these rifles, a lot of people will hand load for them. You can get out to like 800 yards with no problem, even with iron sights with good hand loads. And if you're that kind of person, then you don't even care about the Russian ammo ban, because you're not going to shoot cheap Russian ammo in your Finnish M39 anyway, right? You're just not. So if you're that kind of person, then who cares? Just buy this rifle. You will love it. But you can still shoot cheap Russian ammo through these guns. So let's say you're that type of person. Well, this is a very different type of rifle. See, this feels like a tool, kind of like a hammer. This is almost more like a scalpel. It's a finely made and tuned instrument. Those are the differences between the 9130 and the M39 rifles. Now, the M39 rifle has just an abundance of history, because you have this rifle in pretty good shape, but this was pretty much how it looked probably during the Continuation War, in that original military used configuration and condition. And that's really interesting. These guns are refurbished, the 9130 rifles, most of them are, so there is that, which is fine. It's just a little bit of different character between the two rifles. Now, the M39, again, is just an extremely pleasant rifle to shoot, but it has a lot of interesting history, because think about it. That receiver was probably used by a country in World War I, maybe Russia, maybe it was captured by Germany or Austria, or maybe it made it to Italy, or it was used by the newly formed country of Czechoslovakia. We don't know. But that receiver has a really interesting history all its own. And then when you couple that with the fascinating history of the Winter and Continuation Wars, you get this just absolutely fascinating rifle from a historical perspective that really few other rifles in the world can offer. And so now that we've taken a look at these two rifles, I think you can kind of see what I'm saying, that from a historical standpoint, these two rifles are extraordinarily significant, and they're a huge and largely, sadly, forgotten piece of gun history, military history, and world history. These really tell the tales of the struggle of two countries. And we are so fortunate, as people that may be just sitting on our couch watching this video, that we didn't have to go to war with either of these. But I'll tell you what, think about it. Somebody did. This was somebody's lifeline in a really horrible war. And it's a really humbling thing to think about. And we have a lot to be thankful for. And we should honor the sacrifices of the men and women who used rifles just like these. So hopefully through this video, you're a little more enticed now to buy a Mosin Nagant. While these are fun to shoot, it's a lot more than just about shooting cheap ammo. There's a huge historical significance to these rifles that a lot of people just aren't aware of. If you're interested in more Mosin Nagant content, please consider subscribing to the channel. That's really all we talk about is Mosin Nagants. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, stay tuned. There's a lot more coming down the pipeline. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully I convinced you to maybe start to consider Mosin Nagant in spite of the prices going up or the ammunition prices going up as well. Because these are just fantastic rifles, and I highly recommend them. So thank y'all for watching. Please let me know if y'all have any prayer requests, and I'll see you next time.